مش سهل يمكن ناسي انك فيها مش وحشك ولا غبت عليها بس اللي مجرب وفارقها ألف الدنيا مفيش بعديه مشربتش من الهوا طب جربت تغنيل جربت في عز ما تحزن تمشي في شوارعها وتشكل يا بلدنا عليك وهتفضل في عينيك ومادام بنحب بلدنا تبقى تتغير بإيدينا مشربتش من الهوا جربت تغنيل ما مشيتش بضواحيها طيب ما كبرتش فيه مشربتش من الهوا طب جربت تغني
Hello and welcome to a new edition of our program Around the Globe, where we'll be discussing the hottest issues in the African continent. In today's edition, we'll be discussing the American-African relations, and we'll be joined later on in the studio by Dr. Hisham Al-Ashmawi, chairman of the American-Egyptian Business Association, to shed light on the issue. But first of all, we'll take a look at the latest development in Morocco. Morocco is entering a new constitutional phase after the king announced a referendum on constitutional changes will be held on July the 1st. However, a Moroccan news movement on the Facebook called for a peaceful protest last Sunday in cities demanding deep political reforms. The details about the latest developments in Morocco in the following report.
Morocco's youth-based February 20th movement rejected constitutional reforms proposed by King Mohammed VI, calling for nationwide protests. The king outlined curbs to his wide political powers in an address to the nation, pledging to build a constitutional monarchy with a democratic parliament. The proposals to be put to a referendum on the 1st of July devolve many of the king's powers to the prime minister and parliament. They come in the wake of nationwide pro-reform demonstrations that started on the 20th of February, inspired by other popular uprisings sweeping the Arab world. The 47-year-old monarch, who in 1999 took over the Arab world's longest-serving dynasty, currently holds virtually all power in the Muslim Northern African country, and he is also its top religious authority as the commander of the faithful. Under the new draft constitution, the king will retain his religious role and remain as head of state. The king would also remain head of the army and still appoint ambassadors and diplomats. He will also retain the right to name top officials of unspecified strategic administrations. Many political players welcomed the king's proposals. That speech was the king's first since the uprisings that toppled the autocratic rulers of Tunisia and Egypt, and came less than a month after the protests erupted in Morocco for more social justice and limits on royal powers. The youth-led group has brought thousands of people onto the streets in unprecedented calls for change and end to corruption.
U.S. President Barack Obama urged the government to halt military operations in the troubled border state of Sudan. Obama called for a ceasefire in bloody fighting as the South prepares to secede next month. He called on both sides to end the violence and allow free trade of aid workers and supplies. The details with Shireen Aidel.
Fresh violence in Sudan has broken out, throwing up a roadblock just short of what had been expected to be the finish line for years of U.S. efforts to help end the country's civil war. After 10 days of clashes, President Barack Obama stepped in last week to personally urge the North and South to end their hostilities, 3 weeks ahead of the scheduled independence for the South. Obama said there is no military solution, adding that leaders of Sudan and South Sudan must live up to their responsibilities. Obama also said that the government of Sudan must prevent a further escalation of this crisis by ceasing its military actions immediately, including area bombardments, forced displacements, and campaigns of intimidation. The State Department earlier had warned Khartoum, capital of the North, that it could derail the normalization process if violence continued in South Kordofan. Heavy fighting has flared up across South Kordofan state on the South Sudan border since the 5th of June, between the Northern Sudanese armed forces and allied militiamen against fighters aligned to the southern former rebel group, the Sudan's People's Liberation Army. For her part, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, during her African tour, urged the African Union to get tougher on Libya, hoping to push Africa's leaders into a firmer stance on the ousting of Libya's Muammar Gaddafi. Clinton, the first U.S. Secretary of State to address the 53-member AU in Addis Ababa, also warned that Middle East protests could echo in Africa, where many entrenched leaders have yet to deliver on political and economic reforms. Clinton's AU speech came at the end of a three-nation Africa tour, during which she sought to highlight the Obama administration's drive to boost trade ties with Africa and encourage better political and economic governance.
Welcome back. To shed light on the American-African relations, we have with us here in the studio Dr. Hisham Al-Ashmawi, Chairman of the Egyptian-American Business Association. Hello, sir, and thank you for being with us here.
Thank you for having me.
Sir, how do you evaluate the American-African relations in light of Clinton's recent visit to Africa, in which she visited Tanzania, Zambia, and Ethiopia, and now Michelle Obama, the American First Lady, is in a visit to Africa? How do you see this interest in Africa from the American perspective?
Let's introduce the dark community. I will not say the black, because this is very sensitive for the American. They call them African American.
Yeah.
So the roots are African American. Now the leader of the largest and strongest country in the world, the United States, his origin is African American, not only American. So now they started to dig around, especially most of the black community, most of the African American people, to the roots. Now, there's jewels in the roots that has not been discovered yet. What kind of jewels? We're talking about the human resources that over there unused in Africa. They are talking about the spacious size of land. They're talking about the water over there, the sweet water coming from the River Nile all over Africa.
The natural resources, of course.
Natural resources. They are talking about the safari, the tourism that was never touched by the American, except maybe 1% of what they should have. They are talking about North Africa also, which Egypt is part of this, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Libya, the Mediterranean. So they are talking about a location that the American never discovered yet. So time has come through Clinton, which his wife is running the show over there as a foreign minister. Obama, that his wife is the first lady, is originally African American, in order really to add on to the American economy through tourism, through natural resources, through human power. It could be another China for them. Now the Chinese, as you know now, they are leading the world economically wise. So now time has come for the American to find different sources than China, different sources in the Far East, and discover new Africa the way 211 and 215, the coming 4 years. What do they need from this agenda? Do they need tourism? Do they need money? Do they need economy? Do they need manpower? Do they need more joint venture to respect the American and to follow up the American identity?
Do you believe that the American interest now in Africa is a win-win situation here, or the Americans are trying to exploit the natural resources of the African continent?
First of all, we have really to look at it. Why now?
Yeah,
And
that's
this is a very important
exactly,
question.
yeah.
Why now the leader of the United States is African American? So this is very simple. If I'm today from Egypt and I have a big title in the United States, first of all, I will think about the pyramids.
But we did not
I will
see
tell-
this interest at the beginning of the term of Obama. Now he is running for re-election. Can we say here that he is
a
trying to attract the sympathy of the African Americans before his re-election campaign?
Always everything needs time to be right. If he would have done this the first week or the first months of his election, they would say, this guy is black, therefore he went to Africa. This guy, he is directing the American economy towards the African American.
Yeah.
So he took his time for very simple two reasons. Number one, after digesting being in power, which took him a couple of years. Number two, that the American will accept him as a leader exceptionally without his color, without thinking of his color, white or black or in between. And in between is very important because his mother, we know she is Caucasian, and his dad is not. So, and also when he did not send the president, he sent the first lady.
Yeah.
So always when you send the lady, especially the first lady of the United States, with her color, with her African roots, it will take sympathy. That's number one. Number two, most of
today, Michelle Obama, during her visit to South Africa, she was having a speech about the apartheid and how because of the South African, she's now the American First Lady, and what happened in South Africa.
If you remember the first famous word for the African American, our time has come, never give up. So they're always trying to identify that they built the American economy as much as the Caucasian, as much as the white people. So they are sharing now. If the American going to team up with the European, if the American time has come, that the American should team up with the African, because many of them are African American. So in the coming election, you will see that the African American discovering their roots, going to visit Africa, doing exchange, increasing the amount of export from the United States, increasing the manpower of export of the natural resources from Africa to the United States with cheaper rates, which is needed in the United States. So instead of we having product from China, we'll have product from China and Africa. And instead of we sending our factories and our leaders to invest only in China, we will send them to China and Africa. Then